Bonjour and welcome. Bienvenue to this first Sunday live class. So sorry to have kept you waiting. I see there's already quite a bit of activity in the chat. Thank you, Linda, for letting people know that we're just a little bit late. If you want to know, I just lost my very last baby tooth, which I'm very sorry about because I was pretty emotionally attached to it. But I guess on the bright side, it means that I am a fully grown adult now. Let the record reflect that if you still have a baby tooth at age 36, you should not eat dark chocolate because apparently dark chocolate is just stronger than your tooth. So, yep. But anyway, we have a topic for today, which is French verb secrets. I see there are 9 people here, as if I believe what YouTube is saying. So please say hi in the chat if you haven't yet. I see we have Linda, of course, and Omowaleyo is here again. Bonjour. We have Lucy. I don't think I've seen you before. Thank you for being here. Welcome. Nancy. Also, I don't think I have seen you before, so it's so cool that you're here. We have Aditya. Welcome back. And the other Linda Garmi. So thank you all so much for being here. And do you have your little worksheet? If you don't have it, you can get it on my Telegram channel. I've also sent it per email. Actually, Linda sent it per email because she did it for me because she's very helpful like that. But it has been sent to you per email. But if you haven't got it in your email, you can still get it back in the Telegram channel. And that is going to be the case even if you're watching this video late in the future. So if you're not live, if you're watching the recording, you can still get the worksheet and the other worksheets from the past live classes as well in the Telegram channel. So yeah, that was the housekeeping information. So French verb secret. Please, let's start by, since we are here together, tell me what are your feelings about French verbs? How do you feel about French verbs? Do you like them? Are you scared of them? How do they make you feel? Sometimes when I teach French verbs, I'm like, oh yeah, they are. If you look at them from the perspective of a beginner, they're totally out of control. Nancy says she likes them. Okay, that's cool. It's always better to like something and to be curious about it than to be scared about it. Really, like one of the best pieces of advice I can give to anyone who's learning French or any language for that matter, or even, I guess, anything, is to just be curious as opposed to being frustrated. So that's really what we are seeking to, the attitude we're seeking to cultivate here, and also in my coaching sessions and in my French learning programs like the French Fluency Accelerator. By the way, if you want to check any of that, you have the link in the descriptions. And if you have any question, I'm happy to answer any question live here. Typically, after I'm done going through the content, there is some time left for the questions, for any question that you have about learning French or about studying with me, or really any question that I could possibly answer. So we'll have time for that. Lena is saying, OMJ, you know how I feel about les verbes. When they are good, they are very good, and where they are bad, they are horrid. Okay, so the goal for today is to make them a little less horrid by seeking to canalize them. You can't really master French verbs. That would be a fantasy, to be honest. There's always more that you can learn about French verbs, but you can make a great deal of progress with very little knowledge. Like you can 80-20 the process. I don't know if you are familiar with the 80-20 rules, which states that with 20% of the work, you can get 80% of the results. It's definitely true for French verbs and for learning French in general. With verbs, it's probably even more like with 10% of the work, you can get 90% of the results. So don't be too worried about the verbs that you aren't successfully learning. There are things that you can do to just even bypass the things that are difficult. So with that said, I want to inform you or remind you that having a vocabulary notebook or a system for learning vocabulary, which could be flashcards or a flashcard app or a notebook mostly. You could also use sticky notes. Don't know that it's the best way, but if you like sticky notes, that will work as well. You need to have a system to learn vocabulary. That's absolutely critical, and that's particularly critical for verbs because it's what you write in your vocabulary notebook or in your vocabulary system, which will help you assimilate those verbs. Meaning, if today I'm saying something or I'm mentioning a verb that you're like, oh yeah, I need to learn this one, then you want to write it in your vocabulary notebook to review later. By the way, I don't think I've made one of those live classes about how to learn vocabulary or how to use a notebook or a vocabulary system. So if you'd like that, please let me know right now in the comments. Just tell me, yeah, vocabulary class sounds good. And then I'll make one next week or in one of the upcoming weeks. So it's really important that you have a vocabulary system. If you don't know how that works, there's a video on this channel that explains it rapidly, and I can also make one of those. So Nancy's saying yes, so I assume that means yes to a vocabulary class. So yep, I'll definitely happily do that. So at first sight, the verbs might look completely out of control. If you have a grammar book, like this is the one I use with my students. If you have a grammar book and you see this kind of like wall of words, like these are French verbs, right? They're the most frequent French verbs in the most frequent tenses. You see a wall like that, you're like, okay, how do we learn that? That's normal. That's normal that you don't think you can learn it. Like this is used for checking. It's not used for learning, right? What makes it worse is that the most frequent verbs are irregular. You'd think the French did it on purpose just to annoy you, that the verbs that you use most often are all irregular, but unfortunately, there actually is a rule. It's like a law of linguistics, if you will. And if you look at the English language, you will see that the same system is at play. Basically, the words that we use the most, they get worn out, and that's what makes them irregular. So in English, for example, the verb to be is completely irregular. I mean, think of that. To be, I am, you are, he is, and then in the past it's I was, you were. It's completely irregular. There's no logic. It should be to be, I be, and in the past I did, but it's not how it is. And that's because this verb has been used so much that it has been overused and has been worn out. And it's the same in French. So verbs like être, avoir, and aller, which are the three most frequent verbs, they are completely irregular because of how much they have been used. So it's sad, but we'll learn to deal with it. So at the beginning, it can be very difficult to identify patterns just because the most frequent verbs are irregular and they don't look at all like each other. So you can be like, oh my God, I'm going to have to learn every single French verb, and none of them looks like any other. And that could be pretty disheartening. But as you probably know by now, if you've been following me a little bit, there are patterns in French verbs, and there are patterns really in every part of the French language, which you can leverage to learn a lot more words and a lot more structures with a lot less efforts. One of the reasons why I like this book in particular is because it's called Grammaire progressive du français. By the way, this is an old edition, but it works just the same as the new one. The new one will work a little bit more like this, but it's literally the same thing down to the page numbers. It says progressive because it doesn't mean that anything political. I had a person ask me once, like, why is it progressive? Is it like a political thing? No, it's not. It could translate as step by step in English. It's progressive. It means it's organized for you to make progress. I like this book in regards to conjugation because it's quite well organized. It starts by introducing the verb to be. So you have il est grand, elle est grande. Vous êtes japonais, je suis japonais. So it takes a couple of pages to introduce the verb to be because it's quite complex. And then right away, je suis, tu es, il est. Right away, they introduce the verbs of the first group. Now that's great. Je parle, je regarde, j'aime. So those verbs are not the most frequent, but they are the easiest to learn. Hi, Laurie. Thanks for joining us. So they are not the most frequent, but they are the easiest to learn. So I would definitely recommend learning the verbs in ER first, just because it gives you a lot of verbs with one pattern. I will tell you more about the patterns later. So the first universal rule that you can write here on your worksheet is to learn verbs little by little. So like I said, this book, for example, will give you être first and then the ER verbs and then some more verbs, trickling down drip by drip. You really have to learn the verbs little by little. I see so many students who are just trying to stuff their brain with more words. For some reason, they seem to be under the illusion that, or under the impression, should I say, it's a false impression, that in order to speak a language well, you need a lot of words. And that's not true. In fact, in order to speak a language well, you need to be able to speak with the words that you do know. Now, of course, if you're a complete beginner and you know exactly 0 words, you will need to learn a couple more. But you can already be very operational with only a few hundred words. In fact, there are natives who speak with as little as 500 words. That has been counted. Some people have made those calculations, and they use on their daily life, they use 500 words, and that's it. And some of those are verbs, but not many. So really, about verbs, like about all the vocabulary words, you have to learn them little by little. And you need to, it's particularly important for the verbs because then you can use the verbs that you know in order to learn more verbs, particularly when you know a pattern. This is why it's great to learn the verbs in ER first, because then all the verbs that end in ER, except for aller, then all those verbs will be on the same pattern. So that's super, super useful. Another reason why it's critical to learn vocabulary little by little is that you won't magically start using the words just because they're more numerous. Like, this is a big misconception that I see. Like, I see so many students starting sessions with me, and they just want to learn more words because they feel they don't have enough. And the first thing that I do with them is telling them to try and express the idea that they want to express with the words that they already know. And this is super critical, and that's why I put such a strong emphasis, particularly in my one-on-one sessions, to use the words that you know. And then after you have successfully expressed the idea, more or less express the idea that you want to express, then I will give you more words. Like, you could consider that getting more words is a reward for expressing yourself successfully with the words that you do have. This is really, really important because learning more words is not going to teach you how to be more fluent. You could be perfectly fluent, like I said, with only a few hundred words. So first, use the words that you know, and that applies to verbs in particular even more, and then you can learn more. So I hope I got this point across. If you have any questions about that, please just type it in, and I will be happy to answer. So yes, if you're filling out the worksheet, the universal rule is learn the verbs little by little. And why is if you can't speak with few words, then you can't speak with many. So that's the first reason. The second is that the verbs that you already know will help you learn more verbs, right? The verbs you already know will help you learn more verbs. So you can complete that right now. And then we can move on to the hacks, the free hacks that allow you to bypass conjugation. So I will teach you in this class a little bit how to learn conjugation, but it's also quite useful to be able to not learn it when you don't need to, because sometimes you're just in the middle of a conversation and it's too late. It's actually quite frequent to find yourself in a situation where you just have to speak and you can't learn more verbs now. It's just not possible. So for that, it's useful to know a couple of hacks that allow you to just speak with the words that you have. So one hack that I think is supremely useful, that I certainly mention in almost every single client sessions, even though the same clients see me every week, is that if you have two verbs in a row, two verbs one after the other, the second one is always in the infinitive. So the infinitive is the form of the verbs that is not conjugated. So if you look up a verb in the dictionary, or if you look up a verb in a conjugation chart, like this one, let me just find it. The main verb, the main word is going to be the infinitive. So être, avoir, aller, these are the infinitive. When we say the name of a verb, the name that we say is what we call the infinitive in grammar. So if you have two verbs in a row, the second one is always in the infinitive. Now, I want to put a caveat here because there is one thing that looks like two verbs in a row, but is not. It's when you have a compound tense. So that's something that you know about if you're already an intermediate student. I don't think that as a beginner it is so critical. But if you're, for example, speaking in the past with the passé composé, then you will have a verb that's in two parts. So it's not two verbs, it's a verb that's in two parts with one auxiliary verb and one main verb. So that's it's not an exception to this rule, but it's a place where the rule does not apply. It's really when you have two verbs in a row, such as I can do that, can do. That's two verbs. In French, it would be je peux faire ça, peut faire. So peut is conjugated, right? Je peux. The verb is pouvoir, the infinitive is pouvoir, but you conjugate it as je peux. And then the second verb is faire. If I mean to say I can go, then it's going to be je peux aller. And then the second verb is in the infinitive, aller. I can cook, je peux cuisiner. The second verb is in the infinitive. So this is supremely helpful because each time you want to say that you can do something or that someone wants to can do something, then the second one will be in the infinitive. The same is true for I want to do something. Je veux faire ça. Or I want to go for a walk. Je veux aller me promener, right? So the second one is always in the infinitive. That's super helpful. You can use those patterns all day, every day, and you can express so much if you know just a few verbs such as pouvoir, can, vouloir, which is want, and devoir, which is doit, for example. Super helpful. I think I already mentioned those last week if you were there. So you can stack up this knowledge on top of last week's class. The second hack, which I find supremely useful, is to use the present to express the past or the future. So this is courtesy of the French language, which it's more of a style thing. I don't think many people teach this hack, but you can actually use the present to express the future. It gives it gives an idea that it's more immediate. So like tomorrow, I'm doing that. In English, you can also do this. You can use the progressive present for that. Tomorrow, I'm doing that. Demain, je fais ça. And that's not the future, that's the present. And you actually don't need to learn the future, which is useful because sometimes the future is a completely different tense. It can be complicated. You can also use the so-called futur proche, which I mentioned last Monday. But yeah, it's supremely helpful to be able to use the present for the future. And also, if you want to speak about the past and you have not learned the extremely complicated past verb situation in French, then you can use the present for that. And by the way, if you're in the French Fluency Accelerator, there is a full workshop about speaking in the past, which I believe is 2 hours in total. I mean, it's cut in several parts so that you can take it little by little. But we have a full workshop about the past. In fact, we have already 2 workshops about the verbs. One is an introduction and one is about the past. And I'm making the third one for May 19th. So if you're in the accelerator before May 19th, you're welcome to join the workshop live, and then it will be part of the member zone like we always do. And that one will be about the subjunctive. Now, needless to say, I am not speaking about the subjunctive today among French verb secrets. It's way out of the scope of this class, but if you think the subjunctive is a problem for you, that's a good idea to join the French Fluency Accelerator this month so that you can join this one workshop live and ask your questions live, and then it will be recorded so that you can use it later. That was just a little plug about the situation of French verbs, because it's a lot more complicated than what we have today, but today we're really putting together the couple of hacks that you can use right now, which will give you the best benefits. So 2 verbs in a row, the second one is always in the infinitive. Second, use the present, and that can mean the future or the past in context. And if you use the present instead of the past, then that will give you also a sense of being more immediate, being closer to the events. So for example, I can say, oh, hier, j'arrive à mon travail et il se passe ça. So yesterday, I arrived at work and then this happened. You can't really do that in English. You have to use the past tense, but in French, it works totally, and it gives a sense of more livelihood to the story you're telling. So it's even an advantage. And that saves you having to learn the past. So that's super helpful. And then finally, I have the next hack, number 4, which is for challenging tenses, like say the subjunctive. You can learn just the verb that you need. Learn just the chunk that you need, sorry. So what's a chunk? A chunk is a set of, or a small number of words, like a phrase, which you can learn as one. It's very convenient when you learn vocabulary to learn in chunks, because that allows you to know how to use your verbs. Well, your verbs and also your words. So if you just learn one word on its own, it's not as powerful as if you learn 3 or 4 words together and what they mean, because then you can put this chunk into a sentence. And really, for the verbs and the tenses that are challenging, it's super helpful. So the 2 biggest chunks that I teach to people is je voudrais, and I'm going to type them so you know how it's written. Je voudrais, so V-O-U-D-R-A-S. And it could be with tu voudrais, and il voudrait is with a T, but it's spoken the same way. And also j'aimerais. Now, those 2 are super helpful. So it means I would like or I would want. It's a tense that we call the conditionnel. It's really complex to learn the conditionnel, like the full story of the conditionnel. That's one thing. Like I could make a workshop in the future for the accelerator if the students vote for it. We choose the topics of the future workshops by the ones that the students vote to. But really, honestly, the conditionnel is not that helpful. It's really something that you will use even later, or you will learn even after the subjunctive, and it's not as hard as the subjunctive. But when you're a beginner student and you first stumble upon je voudrais or j'aimerais, which is a way to ask for something politely, you can get very bewildered at that because what is this? I've never seen this tense. It's okay, and you don't need to have seen this tense and to understand this tense in order to use those expressions. You can just say je voudrais une glace, I would like an ice cream, or je voudrais une pizza, I would like a pizza. It's a way of expressing yourself very politely, and you just don't need to know more about this verb. Just learn this chunk. This is super helpful whenever there's something which requires a tense that is too difficult or that would be very complex to learn. You don't actually have to learn the full tense or the full conjugation of the thing. You can just learn the chunk that you need. So I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions, please type them in and I'll be happy to answer. And then we can move on to the other rest of the content that I have. I'm just going to wait a little bit to see if anyone has a question. All right, so if we don't have any question for now, we will move on to the next thing. The next part I call the gift that keeps on giving, because really it's super helpful. And if you start learning it, it will, like, the benefits of it will keep compounding over time. Okay, Lucy is saying everything is really clear so far. I'm glad. Thank you for the feedback. So the fifth point, the fifth verb secret is to learn verb patterns. They really, I love the idea of the gift that keeps on giving because they will keep compounding over time if you start learning them right now. So when you write a new verbs down in your notebook, you need to learn the pattern. So what I call the pattern is according to which verb is this verb conjugated. So for example, at the beginning, I told you about the ER verbs, such as aimer, chanter, regarder. This is a pattern. So you will know for the ER verbs, it's a little bit different because, well, I mean, I guess you could decide which one is the pattern for you. So you could decide that, for example, chanter or aimer or whichever one you already know is your pattern. And then you will know that all the verbs in ER, with the exception of aller, because aller is always exceptional. It's just a really weird verb. But besides aller, all the verbs in ER will conjugate in the same way as the first one that you will learn. So you can learn a new word. You can say that, for example, travailler, that means to work. And when you learn travailler, you already know aimer, which is to like or to love. When you write down travailler, you can write in brackets aimer, and then you know that it's conjugated this way. It's super helpful. It's good to start with the ER verbs because they are so numerous. They're not the most frequent, but unfortunately, like we said, the most frequent verbs are not so easy to learn because they're irregular and they're often their own pattern. But for the verbs that are slightly less frequent, the patterns are so helpful. So you have the first group, which is ER. Then this, what we call the second group, well, like this is how the French kids learn it at school. The second group is the verbs that ends in IR. Wait, Laurie is saying the pattern means ES, ONS, EZ, ENT. Yes, exactly. This is the pattern of the ER verbs. So that's how we conjugate all the ER verbs in the present. So that's one conjugation. So you already know it. So now you know that all the verbs in ER, with the exception of aller, conjugate in this way. So it's super helpful to know that because there are, I don't know, hundreds of those verbs, like literally. And then we have the second group. And the second group is a bit special because it has two criteria to be part of the second group. So it's not just like ER, like I said, for the first group, which is just one simple criteria, and you just know that aller is the exception. For the second group, you have two criteria. So it has to end in IR, IR with an I. In French, we say for what you call E in English, and we say E for what you call I, so it's complicated. But I'm just writing it. If it ends in IR, such as finir, and then it has, in some parts of the conjugation, it has the ISS chunk of letters, such as finir, that becomes nous finissons. This is the second group. So it's not that many verbs, it's the smallest group, but it's useful to know that. So you know that if you have a verb like finir, which has the infinitive in ir, and has the iss chunk of letters, such as nous finissons, that is a verb of the second group. Another verb of the second group is nourrir, which is to feed. So nourrir, nous nourrissons. Or guérir, which is to heal. Guérir, nous guérissons. So in order to know if some verb is part of the second group, you will have to check if some functions of it or some conjugations of it have the iss chunks. So that's a bit more annoying. You have to check that. But if you don't check it, then you have the risk of mixing together some verbs of the third group, which also have the infinitive in ir, but do not ever have the iss chunks. For example, tenir, that becomes nous tenons, not nous tenissons. And that's how you know that it's a verb of the third group. Now, the third group is a sort of trash can that we have decided that we would make only one group with that, and we would trash into that all of the verbs that we did not put in the first group or the second group. So aller is a verb of the third group because it is the exception from the ER verb, so it's part of the third group. And then all the verbs that neither end in ER nor have the two criteria that I just described for the second group, all of those are in the third group. Now, it doesn't really help you to know that it's the third group because a lot of them are very different. But you can learn some patterns. So some patterns that are super helpful to know is the pattern for prendre. Because when you learn the verb prendre, maybe you don't know that because when you first learned this verb, you didn't know it. But if you know how to conjugate the verb prendre, then you have a number of verbs for free, such as, so prendre means to take, by the way. Apprendre, which means to learn, pretty helpful, right? Comprendre, to understand, and then another few, such as surprendre, which is to surprise, and so on. So learning prendre, it will take you a bit of time because it's an irregular verb, but after you know it, you get another few verbs for free. Another another pattern that you can learn is that of tenir, which I just gave to you. Tenir, or sometimes venir, would be considered the pattern, but they're both together. So tenir means to hold, and venir means to come. And then if you learn those, you have you have a number of others for free. So you have devenir, which is become. It's a bit logical, right? Come, become. Contenir, which is to contain. Maintenir, to maintain. Obtenir, which means to get or obtain. Prévenir, which means to plan or foresee, etc. So not all those verbs are like super useful, but hey, you get them for free, which is kind of nice. So that's one pattern that's really helpful. Another one that's super important is faire. Oh, and by the way, we are on the fifth, which is learn verb patterns, and I leave you a little bit of space if you can, if you want to grab some of the ones that I'm giving you now, which are going to be helpful to you. So the next pattern that I wanted to tell you about is faire. So you certainly know faire, it means to do or make. And then you have défaire, which is undo or unmake. Refaire, which is do, make again, right? Satisfaire, which is to satisfy. All of those verbs that have faire at the end, they will conjugate according to the pattern of faire. So that's really helpful to know faire as a pattern because you get so many verbs for free. And it's even obvious because they end in faire. So you're like, oh yeah, that's a faire pattern. If you learn, for example, the verb satisfaire, which is to satisfy, if you're not automatically sure from hearing faire at the end that it's a faire pattern, you can write it in your vocabulary notebook and write satisfaire and then faire at the end. Another one is rendre. That's really for all the verbs in dre, so D-R-E. And then you will get more verbs for free, such as attendre, which is to wait, descendre, which is to go down, perdre, that means to lose, vendre, to sell, répondre, to answer, and so on and so forth. So it's also a really helpful pattern. The last pattern that I wanted to give you is mettre, that means to put. And then you get all the verbs that are compounded with mettre, such as admettre, which means to admit, promettre, to promise, transmettre, to transmit, and so on and so forth. Oh, Tony is here. Hi, Tony. That's a third pattern, humor and wit too. Hello. I'm glad you're enjoying it, and it's super cool to see you back here. So those patterns are really helpful. Jot them down if you don't know them and you think that they can give you an immediate boost in your French from where you are. I mean, obviously, I mean, this is a group class, and I don't know you all so well, so I can't be as helpful with the personal advice as I would be in a one-on-one session. but you know where you are, you know if those patterns can be useful to you. So if you're like, yes, this is good, I'm going to write it down, just write it down. Use the "this is so helpful" filter. I really like this idea with learning French in general. One of my favorite things to hear, which I hear more and more often in my one-on-one sessions because I'm really getting good at fine-tuning what I teach, is "this is so helpful." When the students tells me "this is so helpful," I know that I have hit the jackpot, that I have hit just the exact sweet spot, which is what they can learn next, the thing that they need now. So use it for yourself. If I say something and you think, oh, wow, this is so helpful, you know it's the thing you have to write down because this is the thing that will help you just get farther on the road towards fluency. So that's a trick. It's a trick that I recommend you use. Too often we have the tendency of just trying to grab as many words as we can without discrimination. And really, it's a terrible habit that can really hold you back because you don't need all of these words. And some of them, maybe you do need them down the line, but they won't be helpful right now. And if they're not helpful right now, they will just clutter your brain, clutter your vocabulary notebook, and clutter the whole process. So you really want to be very specific about what you learn now, which is why all the patterns that I wrote, maybe some of them are a bit too far down the line, or you feel they're not as helpful, or maybe you know some of them already and you want to learn the other ones. So make sure you select what I say to just pick what's most helpful to you right now. There are a few verbs that stand alone which don't really have a pattern, but it's useful to know them because they are very frequent. Like I said, the most frequent verbs are irregular. Those are savoir, devoir, pouvoir, and vouloir. And I'm going to write them down. Savoir, devoir, pouvoir, and vouloir. Right. So do you have any questions about verb patterns that I can answer right now? If there's any questions that you have that has popped in your mind that you would like to hear, or if you have patterns that you're not sure about or verbs that are weird to you, now is a good time to ask about these things. Before I tell you what the French don't want you to know, please stay tuned for that. I'm joking, but I think it's really true. I've never really heard a French person being like, oh, we don't want you to know, but I'm fascinated by the fact that it's a book that all the French people have at home, especially if they have children. Like everyone who has been in school or who is in school now has this book at home, but the foreigners don't know about this book. I'm pretty sure that the foreigners are like, how do the French know their verbs? Like, or maybe you think that we have like a superpower that allows us to know our verbs even though they're so complicated. And the truth is, how do the French don't want me to know, really. I don't know if the French really don't want you to know, but the fact is that all the French people know that, and all the foreigners don't know it until someone tells them. That's what I can say. And one day I will make a video that will be the secret book that the French don't want you to know about. But so this is the book. And the thing is, are you wondering how the French know their verbs? And if you are, I'll give you straightforward the answer. They don't. Like there are plenty of verbs that we don't know. Even me being a French coach, like it's literally my job, and I've built a business on teaching the French language. Even me, there are verbs that I sometimes don't know, and I have to check in our favorite book, the Becherel. So you can write that down. Becherel is the name of the original author. I think he is long dead now. It's a really old book, but every year they make a new edition, so it will look a bit different. The one that we will have will look a bit different. The one, and also it's now a chain, so they have made some for like grammar and everything you can think of. But the one you want to use for verbs is called La Conjugaison pour tous. So Becherel is the name of the author, and La Conjugaison pour tous is the title. It may look different. Some of them are green, some of them are blue. They make a new one every year, and I suspect that the reason why they do that is because they want people who have siblings to buy it anyway. And the thing is, like, I can emphasize with them, like, I'm a business owner too. Like, if you have a business and your product is already in every single home of your country, you're in trouble. Like, you're literally in trouble. So what they do is that they keep printing new ones, and they keep making them new with like different page numbers and different order of the pages or whatever. So it's a bit of a pain when I teach classes because all of my students have a different one. But if you know how to use it, and they always work the same way, you just have to learn how to use it, and I will explain it to you right now. It doesn't matter which edition you have. So here's the thing. in order to know how to conjugate a verb, what we have, you have to turn to the last part of the book. So here it's a little bit orange, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you have a list of all the verbs of the French language. I don't know if you can if you can see it, but this is an alphabetical list of the French verbs, and then you have like some special indications about the verb, and then the numbers here are super important because these are the pattern numbers. And as you can see, there are lots of verbs that have the number 3, and the reason why lots of verbs have the number 3 is what I was telling you at the beginning. So many verbs have the same pattern as the ER verbs. So when you retrieve the number, say number 3 here, and you turn to the first part of the book where you have the verb pattern. So here the pages are green. They might be a different color for you. Number 3 is aimer. So it's the very first verb pattern that I mentioned to you, which I say you should learn first. The reason why you should learn this one first is because it's the most useful pattern that you can have in French, because it will help you to conjugate all those verbs. And I mean, you don't have to take my words for it. Just look at like how many verbs have the number 3. And by the way, this is a different page from before, but as you can see, so many verbs have the number 3 as a pattern. So this is the book that we use to find the verb patterns and to know how to conjugate the verbs. So we can look up any verb. Let's say, for example, descendre. That means to go down, right? Linda is saying, I wear mine out. Yeah, you should. It really, because as you use it, not only it gives the verb to you, but also it helps you learn. And so that's why I really recommend doing that, even though technically there is a shorter way to find out how to conjugate a verb, which I will tell you afterwards. But you should not use the other way unless you don't have time or you don't have your Becherel at hand. The Becherel is really what not only helps you find the verbs, but also learn them. So let's look into one verb. Let's say descendre. I think descendre is a good example. So, sortir, desquer, let me find it. Here, descendre, right? Can you see it? It says être ou avoir because it can, that's really for a more advanced class, but it can be used with être ou avoir as an auxiliary verb. It's a special verb. But here, the number, the green number is 84. I don't know if you can say it, 84 or 48. No, it's 84. So I turn to the 84. And here, they give me rendre as a pattern. So rendre, but also they give me a little list of a number of verbs that have the same pattern. So it says rendre, troisième group, third group, right? And it's the same as the verbs that ends in andre, ondre, erdre, and ordre. And then you have a little list of all the verbs that have these patterns, such as attendre, confondre, descendre, perdre, prétendre, répondre, tordre, vendre. And then you have all the conjugation of all the tenses. So if you're looking for the present, it's the very first one, right? So that's logical, like it starts with the present. Then you have all the other tenses of the indicative mood. This is a lot of technical terms. I cannot really go through them all right now. But in the French Fluency Accelerator, there is a workshop, which is the introduction to verbs. I think it's called Verbs and Conjugation 101. And I explain all those terms and what they mean, and when in your journey you should learn them. So if you're in the French Fluency Accelerator, or if you want to join us, you can check out that workshop, and it will tell you a lot more in depth about how to learn the verbs. Like today, we're just learning a couple of hacks that can get you farther on. If you want to learn really everything there is to know about the verbs and about French in general, I strongly recommend you join the French Fluency Accelerator. So that is the Becherel. Cannot recommend this book enough. Like I told you, every single French person has one. It's a brand name, really. I've found at least 3 French YouTube videos in the last year that mention the Becherel because everybody knows what the Becherel is. It's common for people on the internet, for French people on the internet, to insult each other by saying "va t'acheter un Becherel," right? Go buy a Becherel. Just because, like if someone doesn't know the grammar, we will automatically refer to this book and being like, or conjugation, right? We will automatically just tell them to use this book because it's the book we use for ourselves. And tell me if you already knew this book. Of course, if you're a French Accelerator student, or if you're Linda, you know this book because you know all the stuff that I recommend all the time. But if you are not a French Accelerator student, tell me if you had heard of this book before. I want to know how many of you had never heard of this. Like, I really think it's the best kept secret of the French, the fact that we use this book and only the French knows that it exists. But as a foreigner, you can use it very successfully, and it's going to be really, really helpful to you. So yeah, just tell me. Lucy is saying she had never heard about it. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Almost every time I have a new student, I tell them, yeah, buy yourself one. It's typically costs like 12 euros. It kind of depends a little bit where you are, but yeah, you can get one for rather cheap depending on where you live. Perhaps you can go, if you have an international library next to your place, you might be able to get one a secondhand. You can perfectly buy a secondhand one. It's just as good. The verbs don't change this fast. It's just that this company just likes to print more and make new ones and different ones, just because, like I said, every single French person has one, so they need to find a way to sell more. Omolo Aleyo said he had never heard of it, or they had never heard of it. Sorry, I didn't mean to misgender you. I don't know your gender. Linda says, I never heard of it before the accelerator, and I took French in college. Yeah, like they don't even in college, they don't tell you about it. Laura is saying she owns one. Oh, I'm sorry about the pronoun. Owns one, but I had no idea of the numbers associated with the verb. Thanks. Yeah, it's not really useful if you own one, but you don't know how to navigate it rapidly. So I'm happy to help. Like, this is why I do these live classes. So that's, yeah, totally cool. So now that you're still here, and it's been 40 minutes, so thank you for sticking around, I can give you the ultimate hack, the emergency hack, if all else fails. I do not want you to use this unless you're in an emergency. If you're currently writing an email in French and it's like a matter of being taken seriously and you really need to conjugate your verbs correctly and you don't have time to comb through the Becherel or to learn some verb or anything, you just need a quick fix, you can use this. But if you have time, if you're in a learning situation, I strongly recommend not to use this hack because it will not improve your French at all. And it's likely to make you even a little bit lazy. I know because it did it to me. Like for me, just knowing that I can just Google to find the conjugation of the verbs, I'm like, yeah, I just don't want to use the Becherel. But I realized that by just Googling and finding it all the time on Google, it does not help me know my verbs better. And of course, I mean, I'm a French coach. And if you have a French learner and it's important for you to learn French and to know French well, you want to use your Becherel and you want to use the techniques that I gave to you today. And you want to do things like watch the French Fluency Accelerator workshops and little by little learn all the things and do the exercises. But of course, this takes time. And if you're in the time crunch, this is what you want to be doing. You can Google the name of the verb. Like I said, the name of the verb is the infinitive, right? So usually when you have a verb, you have the infinitive. If you don't, you're a little bit in trouble. Probably you can find it again on Google, but yeah, these, right? Like avoir, for example, if you're like, oh my God, I can't conjugate avoir rapidly anymore, this is what you want to Google. You want to Google avoir and conjugaison. So the name of the verbs and conjugation. That means conjugation in French. I think if you write conjugation in English, you'll find it as well. But if you do this, Google will show you the whole chart that I showed you on the Becherel. Now, you might be thinking, oh, wow, I can do that, and I will have the verb immediately. Why would I need to ever learn a verb? The reason is simple. It's because when you are speaking French, you don't have time to Google. And the more effort you put, not really effort, but the more you learn ahead of a French conversation, the better, the easier it will be for you to speak French fluently in a situation. So this kind of hack, it's not really even a hack, it's more like an emergency solution. This kind of solution will not help you get better at French. It only help you get out of an emergency need for writing a correct verbs. If you're writing an email and you just need that email to be written well, or if you're writing a letter, or if you have to turn an assignment in the next hour in French, you can use that, but I don't recommend it as a learning solution. It is absolutely not a learning solution. All right, so that was the last thing I had on the worksheet. I hope this was helpful to you. I am happy to stick around for another, maybe 15 minutes or so. Normally we end at the end of the hour, but because I was late today, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer. I see we have 14 people still on the call. So I'm open to any and all question about learning French, about studying with me, about maybe my courses like the French Accelerator or my French Transformation Program, which is the one-on-one coaching with me program, or. So just go ahead and type in your questions, and I will be happy to answer you. I'm just gonna get a little bit of water in the meantime. Lucy is saying, so helpful, thank you so much. Well, I'm really happy it helped. I will be doing that at the same time every Sunday. It seems to be a lot better on Sundays and on Monday. We have a lot more people here than we did on Monday, so I'll keep doing that. I hope you will be visiting again next week. I might be making the next one about how to learn French vocabulary because, yeah, that sounds like it would be helpful. If you are curious about French vocabulary, I do have a free resource which is called Vocabulary Magic. It's part of the French Fluency Starter Kit. I guess I'm just going to give you the link in the chat because I'm not sure that it's in the description. Yep, frenchfluency.net/starter kit. So yeah, you can download this little starter kit. It's my favorite 7 resources. And also when you download it, you will receive all the worksheets per email ahead of the class, and you will receive all the invitations per email. I'll send a couple of emails per week to tell you about those live classes and also tell you when I have anything special, like a resource or something like that. And you get the Vocabulary Magic PDF. Then you have the French Fluency worksheet, which you might have heard about before because it's the one thing that I use as the backbone of my of all my courses, to be honest, and of my French one-on-one sessions too. So yeah, if you haven't downloaded the starter kit yet, please download it. If you are not on Telegram with me, please join. We are a nice little bunch over there. We're over 100 people now, and I will also announce those live classes. And you can find it's very important. You can find all the old worksheets on Telegram. So if you are new here, maybe you've been listening to this recording and you're like, oh my God, I have missed all of those. Don't worry, you'll find all the links and all the worksheets on Telegram. So it's really, really useful. And if you don't know what Telegram is, sorry, I'm getting a bit tired here. If you don't know what Telegram is, there is a tutorial for Telegram on this channel. So if you type Angèle Préto Telegram, you will find the tutorial and I show you exactly how it works. All right, so there are a few questions, it seems. Laura is saying, merci, Angèle, you rock. Thanks for your explanations. Happy to be helpful, thank you. Lucy is saying, I'll start working on Sundays, but I'll still try to see your lives. Yep, I would love to have you here. If you can't, there's always the replay. It's not as fun. You can't really ask questions. You can always use the comment sections, but yeah, it's not as nice. I hope you can make it. Yes. Laurie says, do we need to apply for each session, and if so, how? If you think, if by session you mean this, you don't need to apply. I mean, it's on YouTube, it's free. If you mean for the French Fluency Accelerator, no, you just have to pay your membership. So you pay either once a month or once a year. I'll actually give you the link so you can look at the entire page. So you just have to pay your membership, which is once a year or once a month, depending on which option you pick, and then you'll have access to everything except one-on-one sessions with me. Because that you will have to pay extra, of course, because it's my personal time. If you get the yearly membership, then you will get 1 session with me for free. And if you want to study one-on-one with me, I don't really have any room right now, but I can still give you the link. There might be 1 or 2 spots at the end of May. So if you want to check that out, it's frenchfluency.net/transformation. I just put it. Yes, the Sunday podcast. Yeah, no, I mean, it will be on YouTube here. If you're on my Telegram channel, you automatically get the link and the worksheet. And if you're receiving my emails, you also get them per email at the same time. So you don't need to apply every time. You will be informed. If you are using the emails, you really need to keep opening them. Otherwise, your email provider, especially if you use Gmail, is probably going to trash them. So that sucks. But at least Telegram is going to keep them really nicely organized for you. So you will always be able to scroll back up and find them. Actually, I can show you what the channel looks like. We have 109 now. So this is the bottom of the channel. But if you look, so this is the announcement for today. But if you scroll back up, you will see the announcements for the previous time. So this was last week, and we had the worksheet last week. I just started using the worksheets to celebrate that we have over 100 people on there. So before there were no worksheets, but you can see that there was also the invitation for the previous ones. And sometimes I also share things like what I watch in French, which is useful for your daily French bath. Woohoo! I haven't said daily French bath on this one until the minute 49. I hope Linda is proud of me. But yeah, so I do share a lot of really nice stuff, and sometimes there are little polls where you can give me your opinion to just, help me choose what to do next, which would be the most helpful to you. So if you're not in there, please join. It's a really sweet place to be. All right, so Morgan is saying this video was very helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Morgan. I'm happy to have you here. Then we have a question from Tony. What are these 500 or 1,000 words which you need to learn French fluently? It would be interesting just to see how many we actually know. Yeah, it will be. I don't know if the list is accessible easily. 1,000 words is more or less the content of the level B1. So if you use B1 level resources, they will be based on those 1,000 words. You know what? Let me research it, because I actually don't know if there's a list somewhere. But like, it's more like the 1,000 most frequent words in French, or 1,000 words to be fluent. Because I know it's an old thing. It was calculated in the 70s. They had this idea in the 70s of the threshold level, where really they were studying what it really takes to be able to communicate. And then they found that some students typically reach a level which they call the threshold level, which is where they don't actually need help to become able to communicate in the language, and that this corresponds to more or less 1,000 words. I think they chose the number 1,000 because it sounds good. And also later on, because there was more research and more calculations, they found out that actually some natives only use 500 words. But those natives don't have much a very diverse life. I mean, they're mostly people who do some kind of manual work, and they don't have a lot of different hobbies, but they have the words that they know how to use. For example, I distinctly remember that one day I found on YouTube it was a TV replay, and the main character was a French girl who was a hairdresser, and she had a shopping addiction. That was the topic. The topic of that TV program was shopping addiction, and that French girl who was 17 and was a hairdresser had a shopping addiction. She knew the word for addiction, so addiction, it's one of those transparent words. If you were here last week, you know that if it ends in "tion" in English, it's likely to end in "sion" in French and be feminine. It's not likely, it's like 99% chance of that. It's like almost a foolproof thing. And I know that she only knew the word addiction because she had one. It was very obvious from the way that she spoke that she had extremely poor vocabulary. And by just listening to her, I was like, oh, wow, this is a real life example of what I've learned at school, that some natives have only 500 words. I don't know if we can find a list, but it's something to look into. I'll check that out. I'll see if I can find something. If I find it, I will share it on Telegram. Omowale is saying, merci beaucoup, I enjoyed the class. Well, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to see you. Linda's saying, I was wondering if this would be the first time you never mentioned daily French bath. I always mention the daily French bath. The daily French bath is the one thing that you need to be doing every day if you ever want to learn French. Pretty much everything else you do will be worthless if you do not do your daily French bath. I know this is a bold statement, but it is true. Like, the one thing that makes a big difference in your fluency really is to surround yourself with French language. So I know I say that every single time I come live, and probably in every single video as well. But this is the reason why I share what I watched in French on Telegram also as well, because I know full well that many of the students will not understand everything, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you understand. What matters is that you have to have French around you, just to tell your brain that French is now part of your life, that French is one of your languages, and that it's here to stay. So no matter how many languages you already have, if you're learning French, you need to add French in your life every day. And it doesn't matter if it's just French music that you love, if it's just a French podcast in the background while you're driving, or if it's a French movie that you're watching with friends or with your family or whatever. Just have some French be there. It can also be books, and it can also be in writing. But I'm a little bit wary of French, written French, because it's very different from spoken French. And most people have the goal to speak, not to read. And if you keep reading, well, you become really good at reading. But really, it's important to listen and to speak if your ultimate goal is to speak. I know that it can happen for some people that they will want to be able to read and not speak. It's rather rare, to be honest. It's more frequent among people who learn English. I do know a number of people, of French people, who cannot speak English but can read English. One of the most striking example is the French YouTuber and business coach Antoine DM, whom I have recommended a number of times. I've pasted the link to his Telegram on my Telegram channel, so you can start following him. Also, his vlogs are really interesting. He's traveling a lot, and he makes vlogs for traveling in French. If you're interested in having an online business, it's also super interesting because he gives a lot of advice about that. But the thing about this guy that strikes me is that each time he says something in English, he cannot pronounce it. It's pretty bad. Like I recently signed up for one of his courses, and he recommended an app which, according to him, is called Beer. So of course, when I was not watching the video, I was just listening to it because I was walking around, and I heard Bier. I didn't know how to spell that. I was like, what? It sounds like beer, but in German. And yeah, the app is called Bear. Bear. It's a great app, by the way. I started using it. It's amazing. It's totally changing how I work. It's a note-taking app. It's amazing, but it's not called Beer. But the French can't make a difference between beer and bear because they don't really understand how English spelling and English phonetics works, because to be honest, English spelling and English phonetics is a pain in whichever body part you want to mention. It's really extreme. And I remember having had English phonetics classes in university, and I still don't think that I pronounce English very well, but at least better than the French people who have only learned English to read it. But anyway, it's possible to be able to read books, even complex books in the language, and not speak that language. And for some people, it won't matter because, for example, like I said, this guy, Antoine BM, doesn't need to speak English. In his work, he speaks only French. He speaks French to his clients. He speaks French to his business partners. He lives in France. He does travel a little bit, but apparently doesn't need to speak too much English when he travels. And yeah, that's fine for him. But the likelihood that it will be fine for you is very low. It's for you to know your goals, really. I mean, that's the reason why we use the fluency worksheet. And the first exercise in every single one of my program is to define your goals and make a very clear vision for yourself. Because yeah, if you don't know where you're going, you're not very likely to get there. So that's why we have this worksheet. It's part of the French Fluency Starter Kit, by the way. If you haven't downloaded it yet, you really should. But here you have the step-by-step process to create your own little curriculum. This is what I use with my one-on-one clients. If you work one-on-one with me, I will make it for you. And if you join a class like a course like the French Fluency Accelerator or the French Life Launchpad, you will have a workshop that helps you go through the step-by-step process in more details, because this is really like small. It's made for you to have a quick look. And if you do what is written here, you will get somewhere. But for a lot of people, it will be a lot easier if I walk them step by step in the course, or if I even do it myself. But if you don't have this one yet, it's free. It's part of the French Fluency Starter Kit, so I strongly recommend you download it from the link that's either in the description or here in the chat. All right, so I've run out of questions. I'm happy to stay for another couple of minutes. If you have a question, please ask it now. And else, I will see you next week. Probably the vocabulary will be the next one. I don't have another idea, so I'm probably going to do that. All right, Aditya says, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. It was nice seeing you. Laurie says, merci Angèle, passe une bonne journée. À dimanche prochain. Au revoir. Great French. Merci à toi. Merci d'être venu. Et oui, à dimanche prochain. All right, if no one has a question, then I'm going to run. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. It was amazing that you could all be here. I'm totally very happy that I decided, or, well, you helped me. I mean, I made a poll on Telegram asking if I should move from Monday to Sunday, and I did that. I'm very happy. That definitely helped more of you to be here. So it's a pleasure to hang out with more of you. And yeah, I'll see you next Sunday. Everybody's saying thank you and goodbye. So thank you guys for being here again. I'll see you next Sunday. À bientôt. Au revoir.